こんにちは、ハリケーンフットボールです。今回の教材は、クリスタルパレスに関する動画です。今回は、前回に続き、ザ・ブレイクダウンのチャンネルから、クリスタルパレスの戦術を分析した動画の後半部分を扱います。後半部分では特に、クリスタルパレスのプレスの仕方、守備の仕方について話しています。さらには、セットプレーが改善しているデータを紹介しながら、つまり細部にもこだわって改善しているということを強調しています。なぜ、クリスタルパレスが独特な戦術を使い、そしてそれがなぜ戦術的だと評価されるのか、チェックしてみましょう。
Okay, so just before we move on into the final section on Crystal Palace under Oliver Glasner, I actually forgot to mention this at the top of the piece, which is probably one of the most important pieces of data through the video, is Oliver Glasner has Palace in 7th in the Premier League since his appointment on February 14th, with 86 points from 56 games. So since February 14, 2024, which is a sample size of 56 games, Palace have been the 7th best team in the Premier League. So for me, I think in the Premier League at the moment, he is one of the sort of pound-for-pound best coaches in the league. And he's doing it in a way that is sort of unorthodox, something we've not really seen before, which is sort of empowering his players with a style that we've mentioned can sit back, can play direct, can also play in between the lines with the goalkeeper joining as in the back line. But now we're going to speak about how they can press when they want to and why that itself is so effective. And it actually uses the same core principles as the defensive shape. So we're going to move on here. So we've got the blue team sort of set up in a traditional 4-2-4, which is what a lot of teams use sort of around Europe at this moment in time. And as we can see, we've got the forward three sort of pinned on the box like this. Now, you would probably expect this player to stand over here and then that player to sort of the left centre midfielder to jump if the ball went in there. So what a lot of teams do, it's what Manchester United do quite a lot. So they are asking the midfielders to arrive into the press with their number 10s actually peeling out wide to sort of deny them the space. But what happens for Crystal Palace is the same as sort of the block that we talked about. So if you can imagine the ball is played to the left centre half, Mateta is looking to curve his run. Now this player again doesn't really want to move that much from here. If it's a shorter distance, then we can probably step out. And this is where Oliver Glasner's coaching comes in and it's really sort of inspired Palace in general. But this player is only worried about shielding the passing lane. He doesn't have to stand directly on him, but he's only worried about denying that passing lane because we've got players like Adam Wharton, Will Hughes in behind who can step up onto these players and apply back pressure. Now, again, the same thing happens where we can jump with Munoz and do that same thing where we're sort of stringing along the back four to go man-to-man. That's what they do a lot. Another thing that they do a lot is when the opposition team have got a spare man in the back line, we can imagine, as we've seen in sort of the Manchester derby, when they use the sort of players dropping out the forward line, Chris Richards is very, very good at stepping out and joining in the press. And Will Hughes managing sort of this right-sided overload here. They time their jumps really, really well. And I think in general, the 3-4-3 is something that is very hard to execute, sort of make it look polished every single time. But Oliver Glasner has sort of really nailed this formation. And it's really good to watch. When you watch it, it's great. Sort of the energy they play on the transition with the type of goals they score. Crystal Palace scores some of the most like slick moves on the break, whether, you know, it's off one player, one touch, off another, then it's cross-field ball, and then it's cut back to the opposite-sided wing-back. The goals they score are just really good to watch, and they are a great team to watch. And I think that's what's made them sort of so hard to beat, especially at home. So if I just move it back into sort of Palace sitting in, so I obviously showed you how they're hopping out of the press in this 5-2-3, but what happens when they play a team like Liverpool that they're going to be playing this weekend? Well, if you can imagine that they have a forward front five, that all they're looking to do is deny the opposition the space in between the lines. So how are they constantly doing that? They actually sink their number 10s incredibly deep to stand in these positions here. And what this helps out mainly with is compactness. You know, if you actually have a flat line of sort of four or five players here in between with one leading, the amount of space in between is very sort of small. You can have Mateta sort of shielding the ball still into the defensive midfielder, like the sort of front five on the other side when they're pressing. But if we've got a situation like this, this already looks like a really hard situation for the blue team to play around and actually play through. We've got the players who can manage these sort of overloads with three players. We can have the left centre midfielder dropping out, the left mid dropping out, the left back left centre-back, and you can't really factor in too many overloads throughout their entire shape because it's so compact. I think if you drop a player out of there and you actually want to get more ball dominance and you want to pull them out and ask the question of this player, that player's just going to jump instead, and then they keep the flat line of 5. And I think this is one of the best things about sort of the way Oliver Glasner uses the 5-4-1 and the 5-2-3 is simply they are a team that can punch upwards, and they stand a chance in pretty much every single game. I think some of the complications come when Palace have to take the initiative and they have to go into the final third and they have to break teams down with their own possession, with their own flat line of 5, because again, they still have them wing backs holding width. But one thing that Crystal Palace have done from just a club standpoint is get like incredible personnel into the team. Despite losing Michael Elise, despite losing Eze, they've replaced him with players like Kamada, Wharton, Munoz, Lacroix, Tariq Mitchell, Mateta. Like, they've got such good players for this sort of system. And I think they've looked at it and they've employed really well for Oliver Glasner's sort of overall idea. And Jeremy Pino's come in, so we're going to see what he looks like in the next coming weeks. But yeah, a really, really brilliant start to the season from Crystal Palace, and they have been brilliant since the start of last season. Not just in the league, but they've now won 2 trophies after winning their first in the FA Cup against Manchester City. So it's a massive, massive season for Palace, and I think Oliver Glasner deserves huge credit, and I have no problem in calling him sort of one of the most underappreciated managers in the league, because a 17-game unbeaten run in the Premier League when you're not one of the big 6 teams across Europe, across a semi-final, a final in the FA Cup, a Community Shield, you don't really hear of that. And even in the last 29 games, they've only lost 3 of them. And the 3 they lost, 2 of them are Man City away, Newcastle away. And yeah, just before we wrap up, I think it's really important to mention the marginal gains with this Crystal Palace team and what Oliver Glasner's done since he's come in. And we're talking about a team that can punch upwards, and how do we get a team that can punch upwards? Well, we take advantage of the small margins. So I want to show you that in 23-24 season, where Oliver Glasner was only in charge for sort of the last 3 months of the season, Crystal Palace in totality scored 5 set-piece goals, which was joint bottom of the Premier League in that metric. In the 24-25 season, Oliver Glasner's first full season, Palace scored 16 set-piece goals, which was joint second in the Premier League. And already in the 25-26 season, they have scored 2 goals from set pieces, which is the 3rd most behind only Arsenal and Chelsea, who have got 5 each. So we're talking about sort of giving Palace the credit for the recruitment, the manager. They're also taking advantage of the smaller margins on the pitch. And it's just a very small detail I wanted to throw in there about Oliver Glasner, not just improving the team on and off the ball, but that's a drastic improvement from the set-piece record under Roy Hodgson, and that deserves just as much credit as a defensive block or a pattern up front. So, yeah, that's going to be all we have time for today on the Overlap Breakdown channel. If you did enjoy, please don't forget to like, comment, and follow the channel, and we'll be back next week for some more analysis. Thank you.
次は解説です。今回はあまり難しいボキャブラリーは多くはありませんでしたが、便利なボキャブラリーや表現もいくつかありましたので、本日の解説をチェックしてみましょ
う。He is one of the sort of pound for pound best coaches in the league.
パウンドフォーパウンドという表現は、もともとボクシングから生まれた言葉です。体重が違う選手同士を直接比べるのは公平ではないので、もし体重が同じだったら誰が最強かという考え方から使われ始めたものです。現在ではスポーツだけでなく、ビジネスや日常会話でも使われます。意味は、条件を揃えて比較すれば最も優れているということです。例えば、彼はリーグで最も優れた監督の一人だと言いたい時などに使われ、規模や状況に関係なく優秀というニュアンスを伝える便利な表現です。
He is one of the sort of pound for pound best coaches in the league. He is one of the sort of pound for pound best coaches in the league. And he's doing it in a way that is sort of unorthodox.
アンオーソドックスという言葉は、普通ではない方法や考え方を表すときに使います。例えば、ビジネスで従来のやり方を変えて新しい方法を試す人や、スポーツで独特の技を使う選手を説明するときに便利です。注意したいのは、必ずしも悪いという意味ではない点であり、むしろユニークで効果的というニュアンスで使われることが多いです。オーソドックスが伝統的なや一般的なを意味するので、否定する窃盗時の案がつくことで、正当的ではない、つまり型破りと覚えると良いでしょう。
And he's doing it in a way that is sort of unorthodox. And he's doing it in a way that is sort of unorthodox. Crystal Palace scores some of the most like slick moves on the break, where they're
スリックという単語はとても便利で幅広いニュアンスを持っています。スポーツでスリックゴールといえばプレーが滑らかで見事だという意味になり、スリックデザインといえば洗練されたデザインという褒め言葉です。ただし、ビジネスの場面や人に対して使うと、上手すぎて信用できないや、調子が良すぎるという皮肉になることもあり、文脈次第でポジティブにもネガティブにもなる単語です。イメージとしては、スリックイコールスムース&インプリシブ。つまり、滑らかで印象的というイメージです。
Crystal Palace scores some of the most like slick moves on the break. Crystal Palace scores some of the most like slick moves on the break. And you can't really factor in too many overloads.
ファクターインという表現は、計算や判断の時に何かを考慮に入れるという意味で使います。例えば、We need to factor in the cost といえば、費用を計算に入れなければならないという意味です。ポイントは、consider と似ていますが、もっと数値的や分析的に要素を組み込むニュアンスがあることです。ビジネス英語やスポーツ分析、ニュース記事などでとてもよく使われます。
And you can't really factor in too many overloads. And you can't really factor in too many overloads. Simply, they are a team that can punch upwards.
パンチアップワーズという表現は、もともとボクシングから来ています。自分より背が高い、または強い相手に向かってパンチを打つイメージです。比喩的に使うと、格上げに挑むや、自分より強い相手に立ち向かうという意味になります。サッカー解説で使われる場合は、中堅クラブがビッグクラブを相手に善戦することを指します。ビジネスでは、小さな会社が大企業と競争する場面などでも使われます。
Simply, they are a team that can punch upwards. Simply, they are a team that can punch upwards, and they stand a chance in pretty much every single game.
スタンダチャンスというフレーズは何かが実現する可能性があるときに使います。直訳すると、チャンスの上に立っているというイメージです。例えば、We stand a chance of winning は勝てる見込みがあるという意味になります。逆に否定文で使えば、全く可能性がないという意味になります。この表現はスポーツ、ビジネス、日常会話すべてでよく使われるので、とても便利です。
And they stand a chance in pretty much every single game. And they stand a chance in pretty much every single game.
いかがでしたか？鎌田大地が現時点の日本代表にはないといった仕組みというものが、実際にはどういう意味だったのかは定かではありませんが、少なくともクリスタルパレスには、ハイプレス、ミドルブロック、ローブロックの時の戦い方、プレスの仕方がはっきりしているように見え、ボールを奪った後の攻撃のパターンも揃えているように見えますね。特に守備についてはプレミアリーグでも屈指と言えるほどの堅守を誇り、見ていても失点する気がしないほどではないでしょうか。攻撃については、必ずしも爆発力があるようなものではなく、少ないチャンスを仕留めるといった試合が多いと思いますし、引き分けの多さも課題とはされていると思いますが、自分たちのできることを、自分たちの戦い方を実践しているようにも思えます。リバプールの連勝をパレスが止めるのか、パレスの無敗をリバプールが止めるのか、どちらにしても面白い試合になるのは間違いないでしょうから、遠藤航の出番が来ない限りは、クリスタルパレスを応援しながら、楽しみたいと思います。本日もご視聴いただきありがとうございました。またすぐにお会いしましょう。